All right. So welcome owners, welcome candidates to the Chicago Market Co-op Meet the Board candidate session. It is so exciting to see all of these owners' faces and to see such a strong slate of candidates who are eager to lead and lean into our co-op. I am Jen Best. I'm a former board member and will be moderating tonight's discussion. And I'm going to hand it over to Grant Kessler to share with us a little bit about this process and why this is so critical to our co-op democracy. So Grant, I'm going to invite you to take it away.
Thanks, Jen, and great to see everybody here. Thanks for participating in our little democracy. And it is awesome to have so many terrific candidates running this year to beef up our board. I would just like to highlight that cooperatives, in addition to their own individual missions and visions and goals, they all operate in accordance with 7 cooperative principles. And cooperative principle number 2, democratic member control, is the one at play so much tonight. So I just want to highlight it and have us all be aware of that tonight. Cooperatives are democratic organizations controlled by their members, and those are the folks who buy and use the goods and services of the cooperative. Membership certainly doesn't exclude non-members from shopping in the store, but we do own and control the business. What that means is that the sort of the business structure and the organizational structure is that owners own a business. They elect and steer a board of directors who are tasked with looking out for their assets and their best interests and moving things forward. And then when you have an open co-op, that board of directors oversees and steers one single person, the general manager. We don't have that general manager hired yet, so at the moment the board is overseeing the work that it does itself and all of our volunteers and our consultants as we need them. So we aren't quite to that structure yet, but that's the end goal. And eventually you'll have the owners steering the board, steering the GM. So that's the structure, and to do that we need board members, which is what tonight's about. Board elections are super critical to keeping a healthy cooperative moving forward and give us the people to make the decisions. And while we use the term working board right now because we aren't steering a GM, while we're working, board members are important to be in the trenches and doing all the things. So it's terrific to have more folks joining us. I'll leave it at that, and back to you, Jen.
Thank you. So I am just a little bit of housekeeping on Zoom. I am going to ask everyone to go ahead and mute their audio. We do have the chat function, so you'll see a prompt throughout the slides tonight. Would love to have owners submit questions to our candidates. We'll go through here kind of the agenda in a minute, but if you would use that chat function for your questions, that would be great. It'll just make sure that the audio quality is great for everyone. And then candidates, same thing. We'll keep the audio muted and you can just unmute yourself when it is your turn to speak. A reminder that all of our candidates have shared a candidate statement, which you can read on the website. So the link to that is here. And very critically, the annual owners meeting is this coming Sunday. So if you haven't RSVP'd for that, that will also be on Zoom. The details are on the website. And then the election process will be open for 1 week following the annual meeting, and you'll receive email instructions on that. I'm going to turn it back over to Grant at the very end to remind us how that all works again. So if you miss it here, stay tuned for that. So just a quick run of show. Here shortly, we are going to hand it over to each of our candidates. We'll start with, we will go in order by alphabetical last name. Each candidate will have 60 seconds just to give a little introduction about themselves. We will have a structured Q&A for about 35 minutes that I will lead with our candidates. And then we will open it up for another 35 minutes for our owners. So go ahead and get those questions into the chat as we go along. That'll be the time that I will be scrolling back through and getting those out for our candidates to answer. And I'm going to do my best to moderate some timekeeping and also making sure everyone gets an equal chance to speak. After our Q&A period is over, both structured and open. We will have closing statements from all of our candidates. Same thing, everyone gets about 60 seconds. And then Grant will wrap us up with just closing remarks and reminders about what happens next in this process. So without further ado, we are going to be up first with Ben. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and come off mute. And if you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, like Jen said, my name is Ben. I am interested in working with the Chicago market because I'm really passionate about improving closed loop food production, especially within urban communities, and reducing the prevalence of food deserts. I'm also passionate about selfless service, and working with the Chicago market is a way that I can serve the community. My background is kind of varied. I have a bachelor's in sociology where I learned a lot about social inequalities, and that's where I first learned about food deserts. And I continued my education in biomedical research, so I have the technical background of science and biology, specifically in infectious disease and immunology. With that, I think that's all I have. If anybody has questions.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ben. We will, if you've got questions for Ben, you can put them in the chat, either for everyone to see or directly to him. And just a quick note for James, I am keeping an eye on the waiting room. So far, so good. All right, Donna, I'm going to invite you to come off mute and introduce yourself.
Excellent. Thank you. Very happy to be here. Very nice to see everybody. I'm Donna Curtin, and I am delighted to hopefully participate in the board of Chicago Market. As a 22-year resident in Uptown, I'm just looking forward for an opportunity to serve the community as well. And I'm, some of the recent board meetings, and I know that you guys talk about it a lot, really the success it hinges on owner engagement. And I feel like it's my responsibility and joy and pleasure, hopefully, to lean in and share the responsibility to bring this wonderful venture to fruition. And I'm hoping that my professional background as a property manager or high-rise condominium association and some of my experience with facilities management and financial reporting might complement some of the skills that other board members already have or that other folks are bringing to the table. So I would very much enjoy the opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you, Donna. James, you'll be up next if you want to come off mute.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm James Geniak, and I've been a volunteer with Chicago Market, running basically all of our events since January 2019. In person, and then most recently we've launched a series of online workshops. And through all these opportunities, I've had the ability to hear a lot of ideas from owners. And so the opportunity to serve on the board, very much looking forward to help put some of those ideas into action. A couple of areas that I'm really interested in to contribute to our online technologies, and also enhancing our racial equity efforts. So I look forward to serving. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, James.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Grimm. I lived my entire adult life in Chicago until 2011, when a job opportunity actually took me away to New York. And then I later ended up living in London for a couple years, but I always had Chicago in the back of my mind. And after 8 years away, moved back. My fiance and I moved back a year ago and chose to live in Uptown. Thanks to my sister, who is on this call. She helped us find our place. And after walking my dog by the Gerber Building nearly every day and seeing the signs in the windows and attending a few events, decided to join, be a member, get involved, and volunteer. This past April, I took over the role of the volunteer coordinator. And after spending a few months doing that, decided that if I was going to do it, I was going to run for the board. Professionally, I have a background of over 15 years in media and management, most recently running an advertising team for Comcast. Managing people is really where I find my professional joy, and creating process is where I find my sanity. So I'm hopeful to bring some of those things to the Chicago market and its volunteers. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Kate. Lee, you're up next.
Thanks, Lee Herman. I live in Andersonville, so I'm not too far from the store. I have a purely selfish reason for wanting to be on the board, to continue to serve. I want to be able to shop at the store. But aside from that, I'm excited to see both owner engagement increasing as we've been going through the last little bit, and to see the outpouring of support in the form of all the new candidates for the board. So while I want to keep things going and provide some continuity, I'm thrilled that we're going to expand to have a wider variety of experiences and viewpoints. I'm a longtime IT professional, about half of that in leadership positions. So I have some business background to bring along with my joy for co-op shopping.
Perfect. Thanks, Lee. And I'm just going to triple check that we haven't got more in the waiting room. I believe we are all good. It shows that we are good in the participant list, although it shows in the chat that it's possible to chat to people in the waiting room. Okay. Jonathan, you are up next.
All right. Thanks, Jen. My name is Jonathan Hertel. I am really running for this board because last fall, getting to see the open house, the actual physical space of the Gerber building, was so exciting. And hearing from the board members at the time, just this vision of what could be, the potential of what could be, it was just really thrilling to hear, what this could actually look like when it's real. And so we find ourselves at this really interesting inflection point of, is the Gerber building the right place or not? But regardless of whether it is, we're going to have to execute on a lot of plans very quickly. My background is really working with nonprofits and data analysis, and nonprofits have big visions and really constrained resources, and that kind of describes us right now. And so being able to bring that experience to bear, to work with what appears to be a really great group of people and bring this vision into some sort of reality is really, really wonderful. So I can't wait to be part of it.
Thanks, Jonathan. Dana, you're up next.
All righty. Hi, everybody. My name is Dana McKinney. And there's a similar theme, I think, between all of us that have spoken so far. I really wanted to be able to shop in a store that it was described the way Chicago Market was described to me when I was first introduced to it. And I really do believe that we can change the way we shop for groceries and focus more on local and support the local farmers and have sustainable practices and all of those things. And those things don't exist currently in any of the grocery options that we have, not to the full extent that I think we can make them happen. And so I joined Chicago Market because as an owner, I wanted to make sure that I contributed to making that happen. And I decided to run to the board for similar reasons to everybody else. I felt I had some skill sets and some things to bring to actually make it happen. I agree with Donna's point that it is our responsibility as owners to be part of this process and to make it happen. And frankly, that's the only way co-ops actually happen, is when the people that are interested in having these services come together and make them happen. So again, really excited to be with all of these various candidates that are interested, and excited to run for my second term on the board.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dana. Sherry? Oh, Sherry, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and unmute, and I will restart your clock, dear lady. There you are. All good. Take it away.
I'm Sherry Rita. I live in Lincoln Square, walking distance from the store if you're a walker, which I am. Environmental and food systems are both passions of mine. I was one of the founding editors, the editor-in-chief of Conscious Choice, Journal of Ecology and Natural Living in Chicago. We promoted CSAs and natural foods long before they became mainstream. And And we also promoted Angelic Organics, and volunteering there really transformed my relationship to food production and the relationship between farmers and consumers. So I work as a communications consultant through Flow and Moment through my company. I do a lot of publishing and web content and presentations and things for a lot of good causes. And I realize I've been putting the causes that I think are most important last, and it's time to put the things I really care about first.
Amazing. Thanks, Sherry. Matthew, we'll have you unmute yourself and come on next.
Thanks so much, Jen. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew Ruffy. I've been an owner now for nearly a year and have been volunteering since the start of 2020 in a number of different roles. As far as me, I've spent the past 10 or 11 of 20 years in career in upper management and leadership roles within the company I work for, including 3 different COO roles. I've also sat on the board of directors and board of advisors for some companies and organizations, and have reported up to the board conversely. I've run some large and small organizations, including driving my own startup, and been tasked with M&A activities, both on the acquiring and being acquired side of things for domestic and international companies. So really, I hope to bring my skills in the corporate world into play with the Chicago market. You'll hear me say something like the most important part about business is staying in business. Well, in our case, it's about getting into business. The visions, the missions, the assets, everything that we can bring to the community does very little good if we don't open our doors. So I hope to be a driving force to help us to get there. So thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Amin, I'm going to ask you to come off mute and share next.
Yes, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Amin Shaki. I've lived in Uptown about 2.5 years, and before that I was in Dubai, the UAE, for about 3 years. But I grew up in Cincinnati, so I'm from the Midwest originally. And the reason I share living in Dubai for a couple of years and also in Chicago for a few is both of those were with my current employer, where I was tasked with setting up office operations. So moved there by myself to Dubai and with my wife here in Chicago to set up the office, build partnerships, relationships with local clients and other teams, and hire and build that operation. So really passionate about growth, and in Uptown, I really love the neighborhood and the Chicago market, the vision and core values and everything really aligned with me, and want to be a part of that to help grow and bring that to life. On a personal side, I own a little French bulldog. I have a 9-month-old, and excited to at least bring the little guy to the Chicago market when we get it launched. So,
a future shopper. Sounds good. I am going to quickly introduce Anthony Todd, who unfortunately had a last-minute work emergency and couldn't join us this evening. If you've been an owner for some time, I'm sure you've run across Anthony. He was one of our original steering committee members before the first working board was formed several years ago. Grant can keep me honest, but I think that was about 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years ago. It's been a minute. So Anthony's been a long-term leader with Chicago Market. His day job is that he is an attorney, which is why he's not with us tonight. I guess it's a night job too, and is also a food journalist. Anthony does apologize for not being able to join tonight as expected. His email is here on the screen, anthonyt@chicagomarket.coop, if you want to ask him any individual questions about his candidacy, and would encourage all of our owners not only to read Anthony's candidate statement that's listed on the website, but same for all of our candidates as you get ready to cast your vote. So that is a little bit about Anthony. And again, he sends his regards and apologies for missing it tonight. All right, so we are going to shift into our structured Q&A for our owners. An extra ask here that if you've got questions that you'd like to submit, please use the chat function. You can either send them to me privately, I'm listed as the moderator, or you can send them to the entire group, whatever is most comfortable for you. We will get to those in about 30 minutes, so keep them coming, and I'll be making notes of those to make sure that we get to a robust array of topics and as many questions as possible. So for our candidates, we will just dive in. I'm going to sort of just round robin this So anyone's welcome to jump in. There's really no structure here. We're just going to see how it goes. So don't feel like you have to raise your hand. We'll just do our best to not talk over each other. And if there are multiple people that want to answer a question, we'll just bear with me and we'll say one then the other. So it's a kind of a new frontier. So we'll get through it cooperatively. So the first question that I would love to pose to our candidates, and let me stop the timer. There we go. The first question, if I can get the participant list out of the way, is what do you think is one of the most important things about working collaboratively on a large project? So as our owners may know, the board is made up of 15 members, and we work with owners, we work with volunteers on a variety of tasks that make up the three-legged stool of funding, site, and ownership. And so I'm going to ask one of our candidates who wants to address this question and give them the floor for 60 seconds. So you have a volunteer. I see Matthew coming off mute.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak up. So as far as working collaboratively, I think it is that. It's making sure that you are able to collaborate. And I think one of the things that's been a struggle, not to speak on behalf of the board that's there today, but just from the outside looking in, is with a limited number of people on the board, you also may have some limited number of views. There's limited things that you can do because there's only so many hours in a day. So I think one of the most important things about working collaboratively on a large project like this is having the people involved that are able to do that. And I'm not trying to sidestep it on how I would work or other things, but I think it really is one of the most important pieces, and where if I take the running for the board hat off and just say from an owner standpoint, I'm happy to see more people running. I'm happy to see more people that are going to be able to be a part of this group and collaborate, because I think we'll be able to drive it further by having all those people involved. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Matthew. We're going to come to James next, then we'll come to Amin, and then Kate, and then we'll go on to one of the other questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I think especially working on a large long-term project that is 99% volunteer driven, we definitely need to exercise patience and commitment. And I think this group definitely shows that. And frequent communication, I think, is key. And I really like the project management tool that we use. I know there's a lot of tools like Basecamp out there, but I think it's really helpful for us. And so using tools like that and thinking of adding other types of communication tools will continue to help us. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, James. Amin, come to you.
Yes. So I work on large projects with large groups all the time with clients or internally. And I think one of the most important things is making sure that everyone is heard with their ideas. I think particularly with the group that I've heard so far introduce themselves, it's amazing the amount of diversity and skill sets that we bring to the table. So I think everything that James was saying with the technology and the organization communication, all critical, but also just being mindful and respectful that everyone has an opinion, but it probably a good diverse perspective on how we approach challenges. So I know that's one thing that I try to do whenever I'm working collaboratively, is making sure everyone's engaged and heard. And sometimes different personalities talk more or command different meetings, but making sure everyone has a chance to contribute, because everyone has great ideas. It's just a matter of how you build a system for everyone to communicate well and kind of share that. So I think embracing the diversity, make sure everyone's heard, that would be important.
Awesome. Thanks, Amin. Kate, we'll come to you, and I will just note quickly if any of our other candidates want to add to this question, just to, I love this idea that came up organically. Just put a little star in the chat, either to everyone or to me, and I will be sure to get to you on this question. So, so we will come to Kate, then Sherry, then Ben, and then we'll move on to the next question. So Kate, you have the floor.
I think Amin actually set up what I was going to say really well. I think listening to everyone that's involved is really, really important. but then taking those ideas, and I think one thing that we have talked about in various groups while I've been volunteering is not getting stuck in analysis paralysis, is taking all of those ideas, figuring out what is the best way forward for the group at large, and then moving forward. I think is something that when you're collaborative and you have lots of different voices, making sure that you're hearing everybody, but then you're moving on from that idea in the best way possible for all involved.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll come to Sherry. Come to you next.
Yeah, similarly, I think that one of the most important things about working collaboratively is making sure everyone feels heard. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they get what they think is best, but it does mean that their thoughts are carefully considered and respected. And the other thing is that people keep their minds on the mission. You know, for example, as a writer, I remember that the product is important, not that what I create is not an effusion of my soul. I'm working on a product. And for a team to remember that the product is in front and not any individual, I think is important.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sherry. Ben, we'll come to you to round out this question, and then we'll go on to the next.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to echo pretty much everybody else saying that the value of diverse opinions, that they really can contribute to a project. Also, with the project I think we're going to be working on, they're very multi-dimensional in that we have to have large projects that will be coming together into this space that are going to take a lot of team work and expertise from different areas.
Awesome. Wonderful. We will go on to the next question. And just again, a reminder to our owners, keep the questions coming either to me, I'll be listed as moderator, Jen Best, or feel free to share them publicly, and we will keep collecting those for the next portion of our meeting. In the meantime, we're going to come to this question for our candidates. What do you think are some of Chicago Market's most pressing challenges, and how can you help lean in to solve them? So let that marinate for a second, and then if you just want to shoot me a star in the chat, and I'll know who to come to first. Then I'm going to wait and see if, since you spoke on the last one, if anyone else wants to jump in, and if not, I'll start calling on names. Dana, you haven't spoken yet, so I'm going to come to you next.
Well, as someone who has been on the board for the past 3 years, I'm pretty clear on a lot of the challenges that we have. And the first challenge that we've faced a lot this year was the idea of trying to struggle with the site. It was something that we struggled with a little bit last year as well. I think we've done some work already around that, but I think I believe it was Matthew who said we've got to stay in business. Part of what we really need to do is lean in as a collective and think about what are the restrictions that we have in the building and how can we make it work. We're getting a report from some consultants that we've worked with, and I think as a board we're going to need to really clearly look at that and combine that with another challenge that we have facing us, which is the funding of all of it. So for us, we're not going to be able to have as much input financially, I don't believe, from our owner base as we will from outside funding. And so I think we need to lean into thinking differently about the way we approach that, looking at donations, looking at organizations that have aligned values with us, and trying to determine if we can source some funding in those ways. So I think there's a few different things, and to your point of the three-legged stool that we've been wrestling with, we need to make sure that the site is able to work. We need to make sure that the funding and the financial feasibility is going to happen for the organization. And then that last thing is the owner engagement, which I know a lot of people have talked about. The large collaborative project that everybody mentioned and having all those diverse voices, as a board, those come from our owners. And so being able to lean into listening to the owners and find out more information and engage them in a variety of different ways. I think Zoom and our ability to do things virtually has actually impacted us in a very positive way. So I hope to have more listening sessions, more information where we can get information from the owners.
Awesome. Thanks, Dana. Jonathan, I'm going to come to you next since you haven't had a chance to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jen. I mean, I really want to follow up on what Dana said there. I think, again, we're at this moment where we're going to go one of two ways, and we're going to stick with the Gerber building or we're not. And I think, both of those, one of the most pressing challenges is going to be communicating as a board to the rest of the owners and to external parties from whom we're seeking funding, for whom we're just trying to communicate about why there's this weird building and we've had some art in it and we've had these events and maybe we're not going to be there anymore. And so I think really one of the challenges is to try to shape what is that vision? If that's different, what are we saying is next? If it's the same, then how do we, help communicate, this is what we want it to look like, here's how we're going to make it real, and using both, sort of this vision sense of this is what a market looks like, this is what a co-op looks like and how you can be part of it, but also here's the data, here's what it's going to look like, the data that we collected as this feasibility study, here's why this could be a reality. Communicating that out is something I'm really interested in, helping to share that vision with all of the different parties who are going to be involved.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Ben, you raised your hand on this one. We'll come to you next.
Oh, great, thank you. Dana and Jonathan, said it really well. I think funding and what to do with that space. And I think, I have some experience working at the plant Chicago where they had a huge converted meatpacking plant where they were trying to fill all these spaces and find, small businesses to move into there. So I know that struggle, and reaching out to the community, I think, is a really good way to get them involved, small business wise.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. I'm going to ask James to speak next.
Sure. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, having worked on the Chicago market's previous capital campaigns, we struggled to raise owner loan funds. And so I think that's a major challenge. Do we have the financial feasibility to raise the capital to open a store of the scale that we've been envisioning? But I want to commend the existing board for engaging experts and also the volunteer team that's doing a lot of research on funding. I think that kind of information is going to be critical to make the decisions that we need to make. The other major challenge I see is how are we going to ensure that our store is accessible to everyone to be able to shop there? Especially thinking about prices. And that may mean that we need to make some changes to our purchasing values. So it's a challenge, but also a great opportunity to make sure that we're accessible to all.
Awesome. Thanks, James. We will come to Matthew next. And then if any of our other candidates can give me a shout in the chat if you want to answer this question. Otherwise, we'll get you in on the next question.
Hey, Jen, thanks so much. I'll keep this really short because I think one of the pressing challenges that we have had, and it started to see some resolution, it started to get better, is communication as well. So all the points that everyone has brought up, I think the other piece is we need to find ways that we're communicating, and it needs to go both ways. We need to communicate to the owners very well, but we need to find ways to get the feedback back in. Because the board essentially is just your voice, right? It's just a representation of the owner's voice. And so I think finding better ways to communicate, whether that be polls, surveys, don't know the answer yet, but I think that's a challenge. And I think that's something that we can do better on. Thanks, Jen.
Awesome. Thanks, Matthew. Bear with me, everyone. I'm devising a new system as we go. All right. Do any of our other candidates want to jump in on this question before we move on? Going when? I got 4 seconds to decide. Okay. All right. So our next question, and we will come to Lee first and then Donna on this next question, is how can Chicago Market best reflect the Uptown and Greater Chicago community in not only its leadership, in its management, in its staff, and eventually in its store? What actions need to be taken? So we'll let that marinate for a second, and then I'll invite Lee to come off mute, and we'll come to Donna and then to Sherry after that.
So the board has been struggling with this question without really much success, both in figuring out how to make things actually happen and how to go about it. We've done various outreach to various organizations. So far that hasn't yielded anything. So I think our first step, the board is engaged in trying to improve its awareness of and thinking and knowledge of how we engage with the wider community. But we're going to have to figure out something new to engage pieces of the community, both economically diverse and racially and culturally diverse, that we have simply failed up till now to be able to get there. So I don't have a good answer for this one. We talked about challenges. This one's probably another big challenge that we didn't really address in the previous one.
Thanks, Lee. Donna, I'm going to invite you to add on to that.
Sure, thank you. Well, I think, I wish I had a good answer to contribute as well. However, I would say that as an owner who pays pretty good attention to the communications coming in the owner's direction, I've been very impressed with the creativity of the events that the market has hosted to bring attention to the project. And I think it's been a great place to start. And I would look forward to trying to contribute more along those same lines. But can't think of right off the top of my head immediately, but I'd certainly be happy to dive in and help with that challenge.
Awesome. Thanks, Donna. Sherry, we'll come to you next, and then to James.
Okay. What I think would be helpful, in reflecting Uptown in the Chicago community, is to think as locally in our relationships as we can, right? So that a lot of our food is sourced from local makers. I'm really partial to organic, but even things that are naturally made and hyper local, I think, are a really good way to provide community buy-in in terms of getting the Uptown community and leadership and management staff. I think we can offer things like, I think we can offer internships, and I think we can work with schools to see if kids can get credit or volunteer hours, since we're a nonprofit, in working with us. I also think, well, maybe this isn't related. We're going to have a BIPOC question, right? So I can save those comments for later.
More to come. So if there's something that you want to see on that now, Sherry, go ahead.
Well, I think in our messaging, we could highlight the racism implicit in the existence of food deserts and big agriculture and big food, and kind of place Chicago Market where it is as a form of resistance to colonization.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sherry. Who did I say I was coming to next? Sorry, I lost track. All right, James, we'll come to you, and then I want to make sure that I am spreading this out. So, Amin, I see that you've raised your hand on this, and we'll come to you next after James.
Yeah, it's perfect, Sherry, your comment that was along the lines of what I want to share too, which is both at work and in some other organizations I'm involved in, we're engaged in educating ourselves about racial equity, trying to transition to becoming anti-racist organizations. And I think that a lot of times organizations think that diversity is a problem to be solved or like a box to check. And really it's a symptom, I think, that we need to take a look at our mission and the work that we're actually doing and study whether it aligns with the agenda, an anti-racist agenda, with groups like Black Lives Matter. And in order to, if we want to have more people of color and we need more people of color to be owners, to be leaders, to serve on the board. We may need to shift our mission or adjust it to be an anti-racist organization, and then diversity will happen organically because people of color will want to be a part of what we're doing. So those are some of my thoughts.
Wonderful. Thanks, James. Amin, we'll come to you next, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Sure. So when I see this question, I've been thinking, I mean, what everyone was saying is, I think, really, really valuable. I took it maybe a little too literally when I read this. How can Chicago market best reflect Uptown Chicago community? I mean, first, I think is to understand what is the Uptown Chicago community that we need to or want to reflect, if you will. And maybe I'm saying this to be very transparent. I've only lived in Uptown 2.5 years, so I'm still learning the diversity and everything about Uptown. So I think the actions that need to be taken is to understand first, what is Uptown, the Chicago community? What does it mean? First, how do we reflect it? But some specific actions that I think might help, which a lot of it has been paused because of the pandemic. And I know before the pandemic, there was a lot of activities already, but partnering up, building relationships with the local businesses, with the events that happen in Uptown and the institutions and the things that make up Uptown or why people enjoy coming or living in Uptown. I mean, that's what I think is the reflection, in the leadership, management, staff store. Like, what do people like about Uptown? Why are they here? Why do they come here? I know the pandemic kind of threw that off the rails because there's nothing in person anymore. There was no fests or anything like that. But when that comes back, because it will, I think being a big part of those things. I mean, one thing was the winter walk that was last winter, right before COVID-19. And, I had a newborn at the time, but we still came out, we still went on the winter walk on Wilson, and that was awesome. We saw the local businesses, the people that were enjoying Uptown and wanted to be a part of it. I think that's what we need to continuously strive to be is top of mind in these activities and these events with these businesses. Again, maybe I'm looking at this too literally here as, being in the community, not just focusing on Chicago market, but it's part of everything else and building those relationships. I think that's what we need to do. So.
Awesome. Amin, thank you. Thank you. That's a great perspective as well. All right, we're going to go on to the next question, and I'm going to invite some of our other candidates to also jump into the fray. I'm going to have Donna speak to this, and then Kate. So if you want to be preparing, what skills or experience in other leadership roles or other working boards or other mission-oriented groups give you unique qualifications or experience to join the Chicago Market Board and lead on behalf of our owners? So Donna, I'm going to invite you to speak to that, and then Kate will come to you next.
Great, thank you. Well, in my profession as a community association manager, I work for the board of directors of that condominium association, and I've been doing that for 12 years. So I'm very sensitive to and familiar with that relationship between a manager and the board, who in turn represents the homeowners, and the joy of working with the ownership group as well. And I've also been on the board of my personal condominium association since its inception 22 years ago as well. So served as president, secretary, treasurer, so familiarity with all of those capacities.
Wonderful. Thanks, Donna. Kate, we'll come to you next.
Sure. I think what gives me some insight into wanting to be a board member is that I've been an active volunteer. I've spent the last 6 months actively volunteering and really learning sort of the ins and outs of what is going on within the market. And in the volunteer role, really seeing who is getting involved, who's not getting involved, having a little bit of insight into who's reaching out to us, and what their concerns are, and having that sort of inside view from some of those volunteers has been really helpful for me, because the organization is completely different than what I thought it would have been from the inside out. And all good things, but it's also, you know, exposed me to some of the challenges that we have. In my professional career, I've dealt with lots of mergers and acquisitions, and have been a people leader in many of those roles, and have been involved in what it takes to sort of make big transitions and push forward when there are difficult times. And I think professionally, that's probably what gives me a little bit of insight into what it takes to start something fresh and new.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate. I'm going to invite Jonathan to speak to this.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, my experience, particularly with mission-oriented groups, is really through the lens of nonprofits. And my experience in nonprofits has really been in measurement and evaluation capacities. My role has really always been helping the leadership team, participating as part of that leadership team, and making sure, how do we, you know, really trying to answer the question of how do we know that we're actually succeeding in the ways that we want to succeed? How do we actually know that we're reaching that mission? And so to me, you know, I think, you know, I look at like the last question where, you know, we have this nebulous sense where we want to reflect the community of Uptown, but from a sort of evaluation standpoint, my question is really, well, what does that actually mean? How can we know that we're getting there? How can we know that we're making progress towards that? And so I think, you know, my role on leadership teams tends to be one of listening and synthesizing into, you know, how do we craft the right language, the right, you know, outcomes around this mission so that we know and can measure our success against that. And finances is one way to measure that, but there's a lot of other ways we could be measuring whether we're being successful at reaching this larger mission of building a food community.
Excellent. Thanks, Jonathan. I'm going to invite Dana and then Lee to answer this question as well.
All righty, thank you. So skills and experiences in leadership roles. Well, if I look at my LinkedIn profile, what I put as my headline on there is I'm a manager of people, processes, and possibilities. And I like to say that simply because I think in the realm of possibilities and what could be, and looking down the road at different ideas and ways that things could twist and turn along that way. So I know that there's an element of that I would certainly bring. My expertise professionally is in leadership development and organizational and talent development, kind of the HR side of things. So right now, currently on the board, I am serving as the lead of the General Manager Search Committee. So doing a lot of the sort of HR-like recruiting types of processes. But the other element that kind of plays in with organizational development is I've done a lot of work on the board already and hope to continue that, especially with a lot of new amazing board members joining us, to look at what are all the skill sets that we all bring individually and where can we best leverage a lot of those skills and abilities to keep the project moving forward. When you look at talent and organizational development, it's a lot of trying to understand what the organization needs, where we can get that help or that assistance, and formulate a plan for that. So when it comes to those types of strategic ideas, I think that's probably where I'll lean in the most.
Awesome. Thanks, Dana. Lee, we'll come to you on this question. I'm just going to bear with me. I'm going to reset our CDAD.
So aside from my business experience, I have co-op experience, obviously, as a shopper. For about 6 years, I did all my shopping at the Mountain View Market Co-op in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I was president and on the board of a 40-unit co-op apartment building in Washington, D.C., head of a neighborhood association that changed the master plan to avoid tearing down and redeveloping a single-family neighborhood. And obviously, I've been on the Chicago Market Board. I've served as vice president, secretary, and treasurer, and also on the Organizational Development Committee, which is tasked with both board development and also our overall organization and how we get the people side of the market moving.
Awesome. Thanks, Lee. I'm going to take it to our last question of our structured Q&A, and then we will open the floor to, I'll go back to our owner questions. I'm going to invite Ben and Matthew to speak on this next question, and then I'm going to double check my list, but we'll start with you two. So what excites you most about Chicago Market, the co-op community, and or being an elected leader for our ownership? And for the rest of our candidates, if you want to send me a star if you'd like to address this question, but Ben and Matthew, I want to make sure that you guys get some floor time.
Okay. So I really love the Gerber building, but I think what excites me most is actually being able to do work in eliminating food deserts, and not just eliminating food deserts in our community, but using this model, the co-op model of community resourced agriculture, is something I'm also really passionate about. I run my own small urban farm, and am excited to bring that passion for FLOSS foods, the fresh, local, organic, sustainable, and I forgot the last one. I think that's it.
Seasonal.
Yeah.
Seasonal.
Seasonal. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ben. Matthew, we'll come to you next.
Dana, I knew you had our back on that one. If anyone's going to talk about FLOSS, it's going to be you. Jen, thanks so much.
Of course.
I think one of the things that excites me the most about the Chicago market and being a part of this is actually when I was living in the UK, my fiance and I were there for the past couple of years, and we were living in a small little town where we walked down the street and we went to the butcher. And if I didn't go to the butcher and I was walking the dog, he would flag me down because he had a cut of meat that he knew that I would like. And we went to the fishmonger who we knew, and we started to really connect with food and the food producers in a whole different way than what I had experienced in other places. And when we came back here to Chicago, I wanted that. I wanted to experience that, and I don't have that. And it seems like the more that the studies are coming back and some of the stuff we're hearing from these consultants is Chicago actually doesn't have a great experience of that. So I think the Chicago market can help to bring that for people, and to bring that really excellent food experience where you connect with the farmers and the producers more. And obviously by being elected to leadership for ownership, it's about driving to get that done so I can be shopping next to you. Thanks, Jen.
Awesome. Thanks, Matthew. I saw, let's see, the first hand that went up, I think, was James. So we'll come to you, and then we'll come to you, Kate.
Yeah, perfect, Jen. I want to follow up on what Matt just said, and what really resonated with me, and I think is more and more people are learning more about, is the consolidation of the grocery industry and the insecurity of our food system because of that, the way it's been set up. And people want to know who owns their grocery store. They want to know where their food is coming from. And the author that we hosted last fall, he wrote a book called Grocery Story about co-ops, and that was really impactful for me. And it's talking points that I use in talking to people about Chicago market. So that's exciting to me. And then just seeing the connective power that we have as a community, and we are making an impact without even having an open grocery store. Just the platform and the values and the connections that we make is also really, really exciting.
Awesome. Thanks, James. We'll come to Kate, and then we'll come to Dana.
I want to echo what everyone else said. I think bringing local food is such an important part, and I think that's something that I feel really, really passionately about. Outside of farmers markets, there really isn't a huge opportunity to buy local produce, local butchery, unless you travel fairly far within the city, and that's not possible for a lot of people. And then the other thing, just being able to put a stamp on the city of Chicago. I love the city. I was gone for 8 years, and it was always my home. And I think being able to do something that would be such a contributing factor to the city is what excited me from the beginning. And I think doing it possibly in an amazing place like Gerber, it's a beautiful building, it's historic, it has a great story, I think would be just really exciting.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kate. Dana, I'm going to have you speak to this, and then we'll come to Amin.
Well, I'll certainly echo a lot of the things that have already been said. We eat 3 times a day, if we're lucky. We eat and we make meals 3 times a day, and most of those foods come from the grocery store. And what I'm most excited about Chicago Market is the fact that I can have a grocery store that I have collectively built together with my community members who align with the values that we all have around this market, which is that local that Kate was just talking about, and the community driven and community owned. And it's not just the food and the local idea of the food being local food, because I certainly appreciate the supply chain issues and all of that we're seeing come to fruition, and the idea that we need to really pay attention to where our food is coming from. But it's also by paying for that food in a locally owned grocery store, that money goes back into the community rather than off to some corporate structure outside of the community. Kind of tired of my money that I need to spend on things like basics like food going outside of the community and not supporting that hyper-local organization that's happening right within my neighborhood. So I definitely feel like those are the things that excite me. And when I hear about from our co-op consultants and from other co-ops around the country, what they're doing and what we're trying to do, we are a little different. And you try not to be different. You try and kind of fall in the cookie cutter with other co-ops, but we're doing something that really hasn't been done before. And the idea and the excitement around making that happen and bringing that to the community is also something that's really a passion of mine.
Awesome. Thanks, Dana. I'm going to have Amin, and then I'm making sure everyone gets to speak 3 times. So we're going to go a little bit longer on this question. We're going to get to Amin, and then to Lee, and then Jonathan.
Great. Thanks, John. Yeah, what excites me most about the Chicago Market, the co-op community, I guess, is the community itself. Well, some of the things as I was, looking into Chicago Market, preparing for this and everything, the core values that stuck out to me most, I've mentioned them in my last couple of responses: relationships and joy. I think Chicago Market will bring lots of opportunity for us to build those relationships, bring more joy, so that when Charlie, my son, can walk, I can show him all these cool places, including the market that I helped hopefully launch, being an elected leader. So I think that's really what's most exciting for me, is another really awesome thing to kind of brag about when people visit and showcase. And I mean, of course, the access to local food and everything like that, I think is important, but just having a place that builds the community, builds the relationships, and in a way where anyone I know that would go into the Chicago Market, they're investing back into Uptown and Chicago, as Dana mentioned, I think is really important and pretty cool. So I think that's what excites me most, is just to continue developing and growing, our neighborhood through a really cool initiative like Chicago Market.
Awesome. Thanks, Amin. We'll come to Lee, then Jonathan, and then we'll round it out with Sherry and Donna, and then we'll get to our owner questions after that. So Lee, take it away.
So obviously one of them is getting to shop there. The community, the joy, and being able to change how the money flows, not only to change where my money goes and to keep it closer to home, but to help improve the economic support for the local food shed.
Excellent. Thanks, Lee. Jonathan, we'll come to you, then Sherry and Donna.
Thanks. I mean, I think one of the things that excites me most is that we are very much at the forefront of this. We are, right now we're one of a very tiny handful of co-op grocery stores that are even, getting started in this city. And I originally heard about Chicago Market specifically through a Curious City WBEZ episode that, was talking about the dearth of co-op grocery stores in this city. And I think the opportunity to be part of something where hopefully we get to be seen as leaders, that we get to put our mark on this as, hey, we successfully got this off the ground. Let's help other people do the same in other neighborhoods across this city. I think that idea that right now we're at the forefront, but one day we're hopefully just going to be one of many, is a really, really exciting vision for where this can eventually go. And being part of that, being part of executing on the vision of helping that get off the ground is really, really exciting.
Thanks, Jonathan. Sherry, we'll come to you next, and then Donna, you'll round us out on this question.
Okay. I love that vision. And what excites me most about Chicago Market is how it's all of my interactions with it have always been welcoming. I worked on Underfest, and I was immediately swept up and accepted into the planning for different elements of the fest. And communications are always open, and I really like the idea of really helping to work with this grassroots thing, and the idea of being an elected leader for me is an opportunity to put into practice that idea of servant leadership, which is, I think, something that gets some lip service, but is very hard to put into practice, and I think we can do it.
Awesome. Thanks, Sherry. Donna, we'll have you round us out.
Great, thank you. Well, it's very inspiring to hear the spirit of enthusiasm coming from everyone this evening. And folks have spoken to many of the things that excite me about the project. But just to reiterate a little bit, it is that personal connection to the food source. We live in one of the greatest cities in the world, and obviously a major metropolitan city. And I see the Chicago Market as really being kind of a shining light and an inspiration, not only for the neighborhood, but for the city as a whole. And we really have the opportunity to be the heart of the community and to build those relationships that we've all talked about with not only our neighbors, but also local businesses and everyone in the community. So it's a very exciting time.
Wonderful. Thanks, Donna. All right, we are going to move on to our owner Q&A section. So if you will forgive me 1 second, I'm going to try to, I started to take notes and I got all disorganized, so I'm going to see where we should start with questions. But in the meantime, just a reminder to our owners, if you have questions for our candidates, please put them in the chat to either me directly, I'm listed as moderator Jen Best, or you can put them here open more widely. Cassandra had a question back to the topic of diversity and inclusion. Cassandra asked, do any of our candidates have a plan to gather more owners of color? Many important voices out there. And so if any of our candidates want to speak to that, if you'll just drop me a star in the chat. And I clicked away to closing statements, which is not where we are. Excuse me. Bear with me. Dana, is that a hand raised from you?
Yeah.
Excellent.
I once talked with somebody else who had a lot of cooperative experience and asked kind of a similar question. What do we do to get more diversity on our board? What do we get to more diversity in our owner base? How do you make sure that we have more shoppers in our store that are diverse? And I felt like when I was asking that question, I was probably doing a little bit of what James had alluded to earlier, which is trying to check the box that, this is something that I wanted. And when I was discussing this with the person, they answered me in a very interesting way. And they said, you need to put out the welcome mat. You need to make sure that you are breaking down the obstacles and the challenges that you may unintentionally, unwittingly be putting up to prevent people of diverse backgrounds. And what I mean by that is not like me, to make them feel welcome to join me in my efforts or us in our efforts. And I think that's one of the things that I'm learning a lot about. I've been doing personally some of the anti-racist work and trying to really raise my awareness as to the privileges that I have. and looking at how I do things as a member in the board representing the various owners. I need to represent our owner base, which right now may not be very diverse, but I also need to represent the community, which does have a lot more diversity than maybe we have currently, even though we have 1863, is it, Grant? I don't remember our number right now, owners. So for me, I'm trying to understand, what does that welcome mat need to look like? What are those obstacles or challenges that I'm putting up as what we do collectively on the board, or what I do individually in my work for the market, to break down those barriers and make people say, I want to join this. I'm welcome here. I'm invited here. That's where I think we need to go with trying to open up the diversity.
Excellent. Thanks, Dana. And Grant's chiming in on the comment section. We are at 1864 owners. James, we'll come to you next.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I really like what Dana was just saying. And it relates to the theories about moving from inclusiveness to belonging. And belonging is a much more powerful force, a much more powerful feeling. And a blog post I've read recently made the analogy that to be inclusive could mean that somebody invites me over for dinner, and they make the meal, and we enjoy the meal. But the sense of belonging is the person works with me, and we share our ideas, and we decide where we're going to eat, what we're going to make, who's going to do the cooking. So it is providing that deeper level of involvement. And that's what was kind of resonating with me as Dana talked about the welcome mat, which is not just, we're open for everyone to shop in the store, but we are open to providing power and agency to people to be able to decide how is the store going to operate, what our priorities are going to be.
Awesome. Thanks, James. Anna, I see you off mute. Did you, and Sherry as well, do either of you want to jump in on this question?
Yeah, I would like to. I was thinking about, I've been doing some EDI work with Wilmette Public Library, and questionnaires and surveys have been part of it, but also part of it is recognizing that the culture that you are isn't necessarily everybody's culture. So, right, taking a look at the demographics of the neighborhood, for example, and looking at foods that are made by people in those demographics, and then having those spices prominently displayed and advertised. Things like that are really simple ways for people to feel like, oh, I guess this is a store for me.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sherry. So I'm going to take Cassandra's question next. So Cassandra wrote in addition to the educational outreach that Sherry had mentioned, how will we engage with the community and fundraise? Are we going to be mostly grant focused? How will we offset the lack of those other helpful profits? What are your ideas for how we're going to get that cheddar? So to summarize Cassandra's questions, thoughts from our candidates on engaging the community, which I take to mean not only in leaning in with organizations and our ownership, but also looking at our fundraising strategy. So as Grant mentioned, owner funding is a strong portion of the co-op's funding plan, in addition to private lending and grants and city dollars. So any of our candidates want to speak to community engagement and funding? And I see, Amin, I don't know if that was for the last question or this one, but I'm going to send it to you next.
Yeah, it was for the last question, but I'm happy to touch on this one as well.
Perfect. You're up.
It's something that I know my wife and I have been thinking about when we joined, but also, when board elections and my interest started, I guess, in this process. And I don't know if it's the best answer, to be honest, because it's a challenge, you know, and with any kind of initiative where you're trying to collaborate and get a lot of involvement from different people. I mean, it comes down to, like, yes, marketing and everything like that, but to get the funding needed, I feel we need to understand, out of everyone that is involved already in ownership, you know, all the owners, why did they choose to join the Chicago market? And I think there's a lot of data that you guys already have that I'd love to get my hands on and look through, but also, why is everyone else in the community not joining? What's important to them that Chicago market might be able to provide without going away from the core values, the mission, and everything that's around Chicago market? So one example, and again, this, I don't know if this is controversial, but I'll say it. I know one benefit of the Chicago market is that it improves the community, but it also is an attraction for people outside of literally uptown neighborhood to come seek different options and, you know, be a part of this. So it's a business boost potentially, you know, and local businesses and partners in the area might want that to help drive more foot traffic and business to the area, and possibly market values of people that have, you know, ownership here. Like, I own my condo, so obviously I want the area to improve and constantly have new and exciting things. So I know it's controversial in some ways, but I feel like tapping into those, you know, the reasons people enjoy being in Uptown and why they want Uptown to grow, or, you know, Chicago generally, and maybe using that in a marketing strategy to get new ownership and funding so that we can launch this. Of course, not going away from the core values and the mission, which I believe strongly in with the Chicago market. But as far as getting it launched, you know, maybe not everyone, maybe there's other people that aren't only focused on local food and organic, but more like a cool place to have in the neighborhood. Food is a definite awesome byproduct, you know, but they want something that's in that space that's kind of a black hole right now, you know, so, or it's just an empty space. Let's get something cool there. So kind of trying to think creatively here of, you know, other people and other ways to get people to join the mission. So
wonderful. Thanks, Amin. We're going to come to Kate, and then we'll come to Lee on this question. So the question being, how can, as a board, how can we continue to engage our community and put that mind towards funding?
Yeah, I think this is the most complicated question that we have. I mean, we need to raise a lot of money in order to open the doors. And I think we need to continue to do what we're doing and have events and have things that are sort of revitalizing the image of the market, and make sure that people know that we're still out here. I think there's a lot of people who have been involved for a very long time, and there might be some attrition, and bring those people back, because the more volunteers and people that we have involved, that community will only grow. The volunteers cover pretty much the entire north side of Chicago and beyond. So it's really not just focused in Uptown, but being able to expand past all those groups, and gain more people, because the more people that are aware, the more people are going to want to get involved. And, you know, $250 at a time can add up really quickly. And I think the other thing I'll say is that we need to leave nothing off the table as far as fundraising is concerned. I think as we move forward, there may come a time where we need to hire a professional fundraiser, and that could cost us money. But I think that's something that we need to keep on the table and make sure that we're looking at all of our resources, so we're getting to that dollar amount as quickly as we can, so we can all go shopping.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kate. Lee, will come to you next.
Thanks. Well, Kate did most of the work for me. I want to pick, I agree with everything she said, but I want to pick up even more strongly on one of the themes in what she said, which is getting new ideas and expanding our focus and our reach, because we have worked hard and owners have contributed lots of money to get us as far as we are. We have a long ways to go, and we're not going to be able to get all of that internally. Somebody referred to it earlier as well. So we're going to have to look outside to get more people involved, to spread the load financially, and probably to look at other sources, not just our owner base, and other parts of the community. So that includes the business community as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Lee. Let me check. Awesome. Any other of our candidates want to lean in on this community engagement and funding question? Thinking more in the terms maybe of even owner loans. All right, so the next question that I want to ask, I'm adding into the mix. So one of the critical components of serving on the elected board for Chicago Markets is that, as Grant mentioned at the top of the call, we are a working board. Notice I say we because I used to be on it. Working board, what does that really mean? It is a huge time commitment to serve on the board. It's, as everyone knows, we're an organization of fellow owners and volunteers. We've heard from several candidates today who have had various volunteer capacities already. And so the question that I'd like to ask the candidates is, what kind of time commitment do you have available to serve on the board? How do you plan to dedicate your energies to it? And maybe a kind of secondary part to that question is what types of roles or activities do you see yourself leaning into the most? If it's marketing, if it's site, if it's funding, if it's recruitment, if it's events, et cetera, and how do you plan to carve out time for that to work collaboratively with your fellow members? So kind of a two-part question of where would you like to really lean in your efforts, and how do you plan to make the time for it? And we will come back to James' question, by the way. Matthew, I'm going to have you start that one off.
Great, thanks so much, Jen. I think with everybody, we're going to have to revisit this question and answer again once we figure out exactly our strengths and weaknesses sitting around the board, the virtual boardroom table. But I've done a lot in operations through my career, and a lot of that is processes, it's procedures, it's some of the stuff that a lot of other people in business think is very boring, and I tend to nerd out on. So, a lot of the back of house stuff, if we can clean up the databases so that we can communicate better, if we can, if I can help with those sorts of things, those are things that I like getting my hands dirty and digging in on. As far as your question of how much time, there's good and bad to the situation that we're in today with, COVID and lockdowns and virtual work. We don't need to talk about the bad, but the good is that it's actually freed up a lot more time where we're able to do some things because we're sitting at a desk, or we have some time that maybe we wouldn't have if we were all back in offices and traveling. And so I think being able to really dive in deep at the start to make sure that we're organized, dedicate the time so that when we do come back out of this, which we will at some point, we can all have good assignments and a reasonable vision of what we're doing and how much time we can dedicate to it. Thanks, Jen.
Awesome. Thanks, Matthew. Donna, I'm going to come to you next.
Well, I am also enjoy the nerdy back of the house operations and financial aspects that Matthew referenced. So that's my initial inclination. But I think what I'm looking forward to most is again, I think once the group coalesces and we find those strengths, that there might be something exciting that hadn't occurred to me. But I definitely want to lean in on the skills that I bring to the table in terms of operations and financials. And in terms of scheduling the time, yeah. Oh, sorry, my time's up.
No, please, no, please, go ahead, please.
Dana did such a great job in sort of the pre-discussion with the candidates of explaining the nature of the commitment. And so I think if we come into it with realistic expectations and understanding that it's at least 2 times a month, and we make the commitment to do our homework and read our materials and think thoughtfully before we come to meetings, I think that will make us successful.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. Sorry, I did not mean to cut you off.
Okay.
let's see, Sherry, you had your hand up for this question if you want to lean in. Oops, Sherry, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Sorry. No, you're good. Let's see. There you are.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah, I'm so
From
glad
the
you guys
top.
are talking about back of house stuff and business management stuff, because I'm a willing participant and in that, but my specialties are not there. Mine are more in, I think marketing and communications would work, but anything that involves writing and also in supporting events, so occasional things. And I find that for me and in the boards I work on now, if we can be clear on small tasks at a time and break down what needs to be done for the next meeting or what needs to be done for the next subcommittee meeting or something, that tends to keep things moving. So I'm hoping that that's a way that we can work. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Sherry. We are going to come to Ben on this question and then Jonathan, and then we'll move on to one final question to round out our owner Q&A.
Yeah, thanks. So, what? Sorry about that, connection issues.
No, you're okay. You're okay.
I have a lot of experience with managing large projects as like a therapy team leader, where I actually saw diverse professions where we had to come together for patient care and to meet our program goals. So that's definitely a skill I have that I can bring as far as working on all these projects that we need to bring together, especially in the near future. And I'm also good with a lot of technical, computer, and other software needs. And I'm also, with my background in sociology and urban farming, I have those ties with community agriculture and locally produced foods. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Jonathan, we'll have you round out this question.
Sure. I think one of the things that we've mentioned a lot on throughout these different questions is just like these big questions we have, whether it's about what our owner base thinks about something, whether it's what the community thinks about something. And I mean, we have the luxury right now of doing this feasibility study with some really great external consultants, but we're not going to have them forever. And so I think, you know, for me, my background in research and evaluation, I think there's opportunities I can, you know, contribute to. How do we craft the right survey? How do we get enough, you know, we've got over, you know, close to 2,000 owners. That's a really big pool of data, even if, you know, a fraction of them are answering our questions. So let's tap into that. Let's be sort of encouraging that two-way communication, both from the board to the owners, but also back from the owners to the board and the community to the you know, market as a whole. I think there's opportunities for me to be able to contribute to thinking about how we carefully, you know, ask those questions and analyze that data, both to inform our decision making, but also to help tell the story of Chicago market as we communicate out about that, and as we tap, you know, the group as a whole to, you know, tell that story, to write that story, but also to tell that story in data as we communicate with owners and with potentially, you know, large foundations who are going to want to see some data as well as that sort of narrative story of how we fit in this community.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. So our last question from our ownership is, we'll wrap here. It's one that James actually asked and Dana chimed in on. So we're going to talk for just a minute on e-commerce, and then we will get to our candidates' closing statements. So James has asked, what are our candidates' opinions about blending a brick and mortar approach with online shopping? And I'm going to invite Dana, since she offered, to contribute a little bit of learning and maybe a bit of an answer around that. And then we will open that up for anyone else that wants to answer that question. And then we will get into our closing statement. So Dana, I'm going to have you do that. And then Ben will come back to you on that item.
Alrighty, so with the whole pandemic going on and everyone having to figure out curbside pickup and online ordering and all of that for everything, including groceries these days, it's been kind of top of mind on the board, and there have been a lot of different videos and programming around bringing together some professionals from the industry, but also then from co-op industry specifically on how does that work. The interesting thing that, you know, I assumed as a board member, oh, well, we've got to have e-commerce, you know, going forward, this is going to be like a no-brainer. We have to have, you know, a way for people to order online and have us deliver it. And what I unfortunately have learned, and I think Grant did a blog post maybe even on this, was that e-commerce is not a profit generating area in any way, shape, or form. It is a lost center. It is definitely costs more to do. And it makes sense if you kind of think about it. When a customer comes into a grocery store, they actually come to the facility, they go pick all of the items off of the shelves, they take it to the cashier. We pay labor for a cashier to ring it up and bag it, but then they take it out and they get it to their house. All of those consumer steps that I mentioned are steps that we now have to take over as the company, as the business. So there's a lot more labor involved. There's a lot more when it comes to storage area and holding things, because you have to keep certain groceries cold and whatnot while they're waiting for pickup or waiting for delivery. So it becomes a huge loss center. And every grocery store out there, the Krogers, the Amazons, everybody's trying to figure out, you know, how do we do this? Amazon has the edge right now on that. But even when it comes to the grocery side of what they do, I don't think they're making profit on that. There hasn't been anybody that's really cracked the nut. Kroger is getting really close, and a lot of that is doing a lot of stuff in-house and creating various different warehouse systems and things like that. So I'm interested in trying to look more about how do we operationalize things, because we control the, you know, all of the food chain process internally. We don't have a warehouse somewhere else. It's our store. So how do we go through that process and make it as efficient as possible? Because I think we're still going to have to offer it. I don't think it's not going to be on the table simply because it's a loss center. I think it's something that people are going to expect. And frankly, there are going to be people that are going to need it, that aren't going to be able to go back to the old way we did it. So I think it's something that we do have to crack the nut on, but it's been interesting to learn a lot. And the grocery industry right now is struggling with this collectively. And I think we need to pay attention to the people that are doing something out there that's different and that's starting to work.
Awesome. Thanks, Dana. We will round this question out, Ben and then Amin, if you want to chime in, and we will get to our closing statements.
Thanks, Jen. You know, Dana hit I think the biggest points I was going to mention is one, that it is a goal we should have, and we're going to need to be competitive for people to want to invest in the market, but also keeping it accessible in that, you know, if we have to have a delivery fee or a delivery membership or something like that, making sure it's still accessible to the people in the community. And, you know, if we have to depend on volunteer work for that or internship, you know, I think we do have low-cost resources that we can depend on.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. And then, Amin, have you round out this section?
Sure. So the reason I was intrigued by this question, I wanted to chime in, is because my industry, what I do, my company, we're a web analytics consulting company. So most of our clients are businesses that sell online, that are e-commerce, or are CPG organizations that are now moving to doing a lot more online. So while I don't really have the experience to be very transparent on the costs behind the scenes, which I'd be interested in some of the data and research, Dana, that you're mentioning, of course. But what I see from a trend from a digital marketing perspective, we've been very fortunate at InfoTrust during this pandemic to actually grow, because most of our clients are digital marketing or e-commerce or are shifting to e-commerce, and they are booming. So I think it's been said here, you know, play cautiously, of course, consider costs and everything, but the trends that I'm seeing with our clients that are CPG companies, that are e-commerce, that are brick and mortar, traditionally moving to a blended e-commerce, even if it's a small percentage of their total business, I think it's a trend that we can't not jump on or at least explore. And I think my personal skill sets as being on the web analytics side, I'd love to, you know, if I'm part of the board, one of the first things I was planning on doing is exploring the data that we have of website visitation and what people are looking at. Lots of great content that's being pushed to Chicago Market's website, especially if we explore and go the e-commerce route. That's a lot more things that maybe we can make a more meaningful online experience to drive in-store visitation as well. Because it's absolutely true. When you're in store, that's the community. That's the relationships. That's what we want. Someone going just online, making their purchases, they're not really part of the community when they do that, but it's a really good outlet, really good avenue for marketing and kind of bringing people to the store once we have that launched. So I believe strongly in e-commerce more than just the revenue from e-commerce, but the brand building, the opportunity to kind of scale, if you will, the Chicago market.
An excellent perspective as well. Thank you. And James, thanks for adding the question. All right. A quick time check. We are at 8:35, so we are going to shift into our closing statements from our candidates. I want to thank everyone for such a lively discussion. So as we get into our closing statements, I would encourage all of our candidates who will each have 60 seconds to say their piece, to think about your elevator pitch to your fellow owners who are looking to elect you to our working board. So I'm going to encourage all of our candidates to think about what's the greatest strength that you would bring to the board, and what's the first area or first sub-team that you'd like to lean into in your support. So give everyone just kind of a second to think about their closing statements. We'll go the same order as we did at the top, which is just alphabetical by last name. So again, that question to our candidates for their closing statements: what's the greatest strength you'll bring to the board, and what's the first area you'd like to lean into, for sub-team or area or project, sort of the presidential 100 days question. So with that, we will start it off, Ben, with you when you are ready. And I'm sorry, Ben, got you on mute. That's my fault.
You.
There you are.
So I think one of the greatest strengths I'll bring is hard work, and not just hard work, but the passion for selfless service and volunteering that I've grown up with from a young age. And being able to apply that to something that I'm really passionate about, the idea of improving food access and inclusion to locally sourced foods. That being said, the area I think I would be most interested in diving into first is that accessibility and inclusion objective that the market has, especially when it comes to people of diverse socioeconomic status. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. Donna, you'll be up next if you want to come off mute.
Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure participating tonight and getting a chance to meet everybody, first of all. And, you know, it's really an exciting and important time in the growth of the organization. And it's sort of all hands on deck. And I'm, again, very much looking forward to hopefully being able to take a little responsibility as an owner and increase my engagement. And I think what I would bring to the table would be boundless enthusiasm, organization, attention to detail, and I think I would enjoy participating in the GM search and also in event planning. So thanks again for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, Donna. James, you'll be up next.
Yeah, thanks all. So I think, well, this event has been great. a very interesting discussion, and also for all of us to learn more about each other as board candidates. So I've really enjoyed it. And what I wanted to talk about is culture. And to me, that's a core responsibility of leaders, of board members, is to shape the culture of the organization. And the board has been in a difficult position for the past several months with being short on members. And I think with this powerful group, we can work to elevate the culture and find joy. I really like that phrase. And to remember that this should be fun. We should, this is we're volunteering, we're trying to build something great. And so even as we're wrestling with all of these difficult questions, we need to have fun doing it. And for me, I'll definitely continue with the event team on the board, but also look to bring in some new volunteer leaders to continue with our online events. I think in whatever situation we're in with the pandemic, online events will continue to be part of our effort going forward. So thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, James. Kate, you'll be up next if you want to come off mute.
Thanks, Jen. I want to echo what James said. This has been a really exciting discussion, and it's been so good to meet all the other candidates and see what the future might hold. I think a strength that I bring is I've been a people leader for many years in my professional life, and it's something that I really enjoy. And you know, I've dealt with people who have been 40-year veterans in the industry that I was in, and then students right out of school. So I think I've dealt with a lot of different types of people, and that's actually something that I really enjoy. And trying to help those people find what they're good at is what I really enjoy doing, and have been enjoying doing with the market to date so far. And I'd love to continue on the volunteer team. It's something I've really loved getting involved in. And then also in organizational development. I think that's a place where I could contribute, and it's going to need a lot of work in the upcoming months. So I look forward to having that opportunity. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Kate. Lee, you'll be up next.
Thanks. I bring a wide variety of experience in business as a technical person, as a people leader, in organizational dynamics and structuring, and a bunch of experience with the market. One of the positive things that came out of our having dropped down to only 6 members on the board, and having to run around a lot to try and keep going, is that we became extremely cohesive and melded as a board, probably better than at any time that I've been watching the board, which has been 4.5 years or so. And so I'm really looking forward to, and this event was a great kickoff to that, seeing new folks come on board into an environment and a culture where sharing and a common vision and making sure that everybody's heard and everybody's on at least on the page that we've all decided to be on together, to move things forward. I think we're in a good place as a board now from a cultural perspective, and I'm looking forward to seeing that continue with a bunch of new faces.
Awesome. Thanks, Lee. Jonathan, your closing remarks?
Thanks. Whatever the feasibility study that we're doing right now is going to lead us to, I want to make sure that we have the kinds of data that we need to execute on whatever those strategies are going to be. Wherever that vision is going to take us, I want to help us define what that looks like and how we're going to measure how we're getting there. Where are we in that whole process overall? So, you know, I really want to, once I come on board, be able to dig into the kinds of research strategies that we have, what we've done in the past that's been successful, and how we can do more of that. And, you know, really trying to figure out who are our owners, who's represented there, who's not represented there. Because, you know, it's a place about food, but it's not just about that. We are situated as the Chicago market within a bigger context. I also have a background in education, and I'm really excited to think about what our educational outreach and our kinds of classes that we could offer, what those potentially look like as we get closer to having a real space and a real opportunity to connect to people.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Dana, you have the floor.
I wanted to echo a little bit about what Lee had said about being one of the incumbent board members running again. It was one of those decisions where I said to myself, do I want to do this? Do I still want to keep going? Do I still want to make this thing happen? And I could say that I picked the short straw in being the one team member on our org dev team that ended up having to do the recruitment and board candidate kind of, process. But instead, I am going to say I was absolutely floored and honored that when we offered some workshops about, hey, do you want to be on a board? What does board work look like? That there was such a phenomenal response. We had, I think, 32 people attend those different sessions, and we got these amazing new candidates that have joined me tonight on board with running for the board and being part of this amazing project. And the diversity that this group brings and the excitement and passion that I've heard from each of them as I talk to them each individually to kind of let them know, as Donna said, what they were getting into before signing up for this was absolutely energizing for me. It was one of those things that made me kind of feel like, okay, I get it. This is sort of what we're doing, and this is who we are. These are the people that are stepping forward with these diverse roles. So it's been really exciting tonight to get to see everybody see each other. I know as far as leaning in, helping get everybody placed into places, and part of my work on the org dev team will be doing that. But also I know if we get the positive report back from the consultants that Gerber should be our first choice and we decide to go in that direction, there's going to be a whole lot of project planning and a whole lot of things like getting a GM on board and things like that that we'll need to move very quickly on. So I hope that I would bring some of the history of what we've done and educating and onboarding some of the new board members so that they know what they need to know in order to move forward very quickly, should that be the way we need to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Dana. Sherry, I'm going to ask you to come off mute. We'll have your closing remarks.
Very smart to remind me about the mute first.
All good. You're good.
Yeah, I want to thank you all too. This has been a really great night. And while I was listening to everybody else's closing statements, Kate got me all excited about working with volunteers, and then Jonathan got me all excited about doing outreach. So I should add those. But I had been thinking a lot that what I think I have to offer is an ability to help the co-op work smart. So in addition to being interested in working with volunteers and doing outreach, which I do for the library and for the Jung Center, I think I can, one thing I also offer is the ability to research, to collaborate so that everybody's efforts are most effective, to maximize other people's skills and community involvement. So that sounds pretty vague to me, but I think I feel a little bit vague about what I'm doing so far, right? I guess we'd have to decide our tasks and then where we could each move forward. So if I can do more than one thing and some other people mention more than one thing, we can each decide where we're most needed for each project. And I think I'm excited to be part of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Sherry. That sounds awesome. Matthew, we'll come to you next.
Thanks so much, Jen. And actually, just quickly, thank you, Jen, for moderating this and for doing such a great job. It really makes a big difference. As a whole, looking at this group really makes me happy. And I think Deborah in the comments just talked about this too, to see such a passionate group of people running, and almost more importantly, a passionate and engaged owner group asking questions and being involved. As Grant said at the start, it's an owner and volunteer led and run organization. So it's all of our roles to hold ourselves, both personally and the board, responsible to frankly get shit done. Regarding strength, it's my business experience and expertise. I think I'll help to ensure we stay focused on driving towards our goal to open and to communicate it well with owners. With engagement, I'm already involved in a number of teams, including the to market team that I hope to continue to help with or lead, and to find where the other areas are that I'm needed. I'm ready to jump in. So The other part, I challenge you guys all to stay engaged, from an owner standpoint. Keep asking questions. Hold our feet to the fire, because we are representing your voice, or whoever gets voted in represents your voice. So I believe that we can do great things together, and thank you so much, and I appreciate your vote.
Excellent. Thanks, Matthew. Amin, we will have you bring it home tonight. Round us out with your final closing statement.
Tough to follow Matthew there. Really inspirational, so thank you. Really, for me, I think bringing it back to the very, very first question of where everyone's head, making sure the board listens and it brings diversity to the group, and what Uptown diversity means. I think what I might have a little bit different opinion on than some people, and I haven't lived in Chicago that long, so I like to think that I'll bring fresh perspectives, different ideas, more creativity, and my background in marketing and web analytics hopefully will stir up some new ways to drive better marketing and fundraising results. I think those are the areas that I'd probably want to jump in first. I mentioned in the last question, getting my hands dirty with what people are looking at on the website, even as an indicator of what areas are most of interest versus not from all of the amazing content, and how do we translate that into actions to raise more funds, get the word out, build the brand. I think that's kind of where I would jump in, and I think where I could show a lot of value along with my possibly different mindset on some things. So fresh perspective and jumping in on the marketing fundraising. That's where I'd focus.
Excellent. Thank you. As I mentioned at the top of the call, Anthony had a last-minute work emergency, so he was not able to join us tonight, but did ask that anyone could reach out to him on his email, which is here on the screen, anthonyt@chicagomarket.coop. Anthony's one of our incumbent board members running for re-election, and you can read his candidate statement on the website, which was linked earlier in the chat as well. Or you can go to chicagomarket.coop/news, and you'll find it at the very top of the list. I am going to ask Grant if he will take the mic for some closing remarks about what comes next in this process, and how our owners can continue to stay engaged and to round out this voting process.
All right, thank you, Jen. I want to answer the question. I didn't get to answer any questions tonight. I want to answer the question, what excites me most about Chicago Market right now? And some of the closing remarks hit on exactly what I want to say, which is that I'm excited to have this amazing group of people stepping up to help move things forward. And I'm equally excited that there are folks here engaged, owners engaged like Deborah and others, asking questions, listening, taking the time on an evening to see who's running for your board and being prepared to vote for them. That's awesome. Very excited. So quick mechanical stuff. The annual meeting is this Sunday, and if you're not already registered, I am throwing a link in the chat for you. Go to Chicago Market's website and be sure to get registered for the annual meeting. If you've RSVP'd, you'll get a link just like you did to tonight's. So please do that. We'd love to have you participate. If you're curious about what drives all of this and the voting and such, sorry, I started to answer the wrong question about bylaws. About the bylaws, a couple things happen at this annual meeting. Annual meeting is part of co-op. It's written into the bylaws that we must host one, and it's a business meeting where the board reports to the owners and gives an annual wrap-up. We will have an annual report ready for you that night too. PDF thing we'll give you a link to. And so you get a recap of the year, you get some financial information from our treasurer, and you steer your co-op in the sense that you elect board of directors. And this year, this doesn't always happen, but when the board sees a need to make some edits and amendments to the bylaws, we do it through owner voting as well. So it's not up to the board to change bylaws on their own, but they make suggested changes to the owners and we ask you to ratify them. So we do have 3 of them up for ratification this year. I'm quick looking for the link. We have a post up on our website that describes them and a reasoning behind them, and that'll also all be explained in your here it is. I'll get it for you just a second. That will also be explained in the email you get after the annual meeting. So the way the election actually works is, whether you come to the meeting or not this Sunday, shortly after the meeting, you'll get an email and it will have a link to where you go vote. Voting will be open for a week. You vote for these directors that are here, and you vote for laws amendments. Oop, Jen, it's cutting me off.
Sorry.
I just
Sorry,
got
I was trying to unmute my. Sorry, that was my fault.
Am I on now? Can you hear
No,
me?
you're good. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, that was technical glitch right at the
Yes.
end.
Right. It's really important, whatever I was saying. Voting is simple. There'll be an online link in the email to you. And the email will also contain a link to your annual report. Is there something else? Oh, so the mechanics of voting will be explained clearly in that, and you each vote for one of these boards. One of these, you have, if you're curious about the quantity, the way it works is you each will have 11 votes to cast for folks who are running. So that'll all be explained in the email again as well too. We'd love to have, so board members, as you can see, are getting involved. Candidates are getting involved. If you're on this call and are not currently a volunteer, we'd love you to consider it. Kate, who spoke earlier, is eager to hear from you. I will give you her email address. I begin to typing into the chat, so shoot Kate an email if you'd like to get involved. The power of us moving this forward is, at this point in time, largely volunteer driven. Obviously, once we're an open grocery store, we run by folks that we hire from the neighborhood. So, but at the moment, it takes a village, and we would love to have you get involved. I think that's it for me, Jen. Back to you.
So I will just close it up to, again, I just want to thank all of our owners for engaging in the process. Be on the lookout for the voting email in your inbox, as Grant mentioned, and we will see everyone at the annual meeting on Sunday. I'm going to ask our candidates to stay on for just another 60 seconds in case anyone from our ownership has any last-minute questions, but otherwise, meeting adjourned, and thank you so much for your time on I don't even know what date it is, on a evening over dinner time. Thank you, everyone.